Phineas Cooper adjusted his diamond cufflinks, sneering at the memory of the woman he left behind in a dusty courtroom just 2 years ago. He stood on the steps of the world's most exclusive royal gala, his arm draped around a mistress half his age, convinced that tonight would cement his status among the global elite. He believed power was defined by the size of a portfolio and the beauty of a companion. He was wrong. The doors were about to open, and the boring housewife he discarded wasn't just a guest. She was the crowned royalty holding the keys to his destruction. The invitation had arrived 3 months ago, embossed on heavy cream cardstock with gold leaf edges that felt cool and sharp against the fingertips. It was the kind of stationery that whispered old money, the type that didn't need to shout to be heard. The Royal Charity Ball of the Grand Duchy of Valoria, hosted at the Pierre, New York City, by invitation of Her Royal Highness. For Phineas Cooper, a man who had made his fortune aggressively shorting pharmaceutical stocks and bullying tech startups into hostile takeovers, this invitation was not just a piece of paper. It was a validation. It was the final key to the only door that had remained locked to him, the inner sanctum of European aristocracy. "Can you believe they actually invited you?" Tiffany asked, her voice high and tinny as she examined her reflection in the darkened window of the Bentley Flying Spur. She adjusted a strap on her dress, a crimson sequined affair that left very little to the imagination and cost more than most people's annual mortgage payments. Phineas laughed, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the plush leather of the car's interior. "Of course they invited me, Tiff. Money talks. And right now, my money is screaming. The Valorian Fund is looking for American partners. They need my capital." He looked out the window as the New York skyline blurred past. It was a crisp evening in late October 2025. The city was alive, but Phineas felt above it all. He thought back to 2 years prior, to a drab mediation room in Lower Manhattan. He remembered the face of his ex-wife, Genevieve. Genevieve. Even the name tasted bland to him now. She had been quiet, dutiful, and painfully ordinary. She wore cardigan sweaters and spent her days volunteering at animal shelters or reading in the park. She had no ambition, no drive, and, most importantly to Phineas, no flash. When he had filed for divorce, he had been brutal. "I need someone who fits the life I'm building, Jen," he had told her, checking his watch while she wept silently across the table. "You're quaint. But I'm buying a penthouse on 57th Street. You belong in a cottage in the suburbs. Take the settlement and disappear. Don't embarrass me." And she had. She had signed the papers, taken a settlement that was a fraction of what she was owed, because she refused to fight him, and vanished. He hadn't seen or heard from her since. He assumed she was living a small, pathetic life somewhere in the Midwest, probably knitting socks. "Phineas, baby, you're zoning out," Tiffany snapped her gum, pulling him back to the present. "Does my chest look okay in this? I want to make sure the photographers get a good angle." Phineas looked at her. Tiffany was everything Genevieve wasn't. She was loud, she was obsessed with status, and she was decorative. She was exactly what he thought he needed. "You look expensive," Phineas said, which to him was the highest compliment. "Just remember, tonight is about networking. The hostess, this mysterious duchess or whatever she is rumored to be looking for a primary investor for the Royal Trust. If I land that, I double my net worth overnight." The Bentley slowed as it approached the Pierre. The line of cars was staggering. Rolls-Royces, Maybachs, vintage Aston Martins. The paparazzi were swarming the barricades, flashes popping like lightning storms. Phineas checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. His tuxedo was bespoke Tom Ford, his watch a Patek Philippe Nautilus. He looked like a king. He had no idea that he was walking into an execution. The grand ballroom of the Pierre had been transformed. It no longer looked like a hotel in New York. It looked like Versailles in the 18th century. Thousands of white roses cascaded from the ceiling, interspersed with crystal chandeliers that cast a warm, golden glow over the assembly. A string quartet played softly in the corner, the music weaving through the chatter of billionaires, diplomats, and celebrities. Phineas stepped onto the red carpet of the entryway, Tiffany clinging to his arm like a barnacle. The photographers shouted names, but they weren't shouting for Phineas. They were screaming for the couple behind him, a famous Hollywood actor and his supermodel wife. Phineas scowled, tightening his grip on Tiffany's waist. "Keep moving," he muttered. "They'll know who I am soon enough." They entered the ballroom, and the sheer scale of the wealth in the room hit them. This wasn't just rich. This was we own countries rich. To his left, Phineas spotted the CEO of a major oil conglomerate chatting with a Saudi prince. To his right, the heiress to a French luxury goods empire was laughing with a senator. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered, her eyes wide. Isn't that the lady who owns the cosmetic empire?" "Keep your voice down," Phineas hissed. "Act like you belong here." He scanned the room, looking for a server. He needed a drink. He grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray without making eye contact with the waiter. He took a sip and frowned. Vintage Dom Perignon. Acceptable. "So, where is this queen?" Tiffany asked, looking around. "I thought you said she was hosting." "She's a duchess, not a queen, though the rumors say she's effectively the monarch of the region," Phineas corrected her, though he barely knew the details himself. He had only skimmed the briefing his assistant had prepared. "And she'll make an entrance. These royals love the drama." "Drama is fun," Tiffany giggled. "Hey, let's go take a selfie by that ice sculpture." "No selfies," Phineas snapped. "We are here to work." He began to maneuver them through the crowd, his eyes locking onto targets. He spotted Benedict Cumberbatch. No, not the actor, but a rival hedge fund manager named Benedict Sterling. Wait, no, Sterling is banned. Let's call him Benedict Thorne. No, Thorne is banned. Benedict Montgomery. Benedict Montgomery was Phineas's nemesis. They had fought over the same tech IPO last year, and Benedict had won. Seeing him here made Phineas's blood boil. "Well, well," Benedict drawled, turning as Phineas approached. He was holding a scotch, looking entirely too comfortable. "Phineas Cooper, I didn't think you had the pedigree for this event. +1?" He glanced at Tiffany with a look of amused pity. "I was personally invited, Benedict." Phineas lied smoothly, "just like everyone else. And this is Tiffany." "Charmed," Benedict said, not looking at her. "You know, Phineas, word on the street is that the hostess is quite particular about her guest list. I was surprised to see your name on the manifest. Usually she filters out the new money." "My money spends just as well as yours," Phineas shot back, his jaw tightening. "I'm here to close the Valorian deal." Benedict chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "The Valorian deal? Oh, Phineas, you really haven't done your homework, have you? You don't know who she is?" "I know she's a royal with deep pockets," Phineas said dismissively. "She's a woman of principle," Benedict said, his eyes twinkling with a secret joke. "And she has a memory like an elephant. Good luck, Phineas. You're going to need it." Benedict turned his back and walked away. Phineas stared after him, irritated. What was that supposed to mean? "What a jerk," Tiffany said, rolling her eyes. "He's just jealous of your suit." "He's hiding something," Phineas muttered. "Come on, let's find our table." They moved deeper into the room. As they walked, Phineas began to notice something unsettling. People were looking at him, but they weren't looking with admiration or envy. They were whispering. He saw a group of socialites glance at him, cover their mouths with gloved hands, and giggle. He saw a powerful banker point him out to his wife, who shook her head with a look of disdain. Paranoia began to prickle at the back of Phineas's neck. Was it his tie? Was it Tiffany? Tiffany was currently trying to discreetly pick a wedgie while holding her champagne glass. Phineas nudged her sharply. "Stop it! You're embarrassing me." "I'm uncomfortable," she whined. "This dress is tight. Beauty is pain, Tiffany. Deal with it." They found their table, table 14, located near the back, far from the dais where the royal party would sit. Phineas frowned. Table 14. He was usually at table 1 or 2. This was a slight. "We're in the nosebleeds," he muttered, slamming his drink down on the pristine tablecloth. "Someone is going to get fired for this." "At least the flowers are pretty," Tiffany offered, poking a white rose. Phineas ignored her. He was scanning the room again. Suddenly he froze. Near the front of the room, talking to the Prime Minister of Canada, was a man Phineas recognized. It was Hugo. Hugo had been Genevieve's brother, or maybe her cousin. Phineas had never really paid attention to Genevieve's family. He knew she had a relative who worked in security or something, but the man standing there wasn't dressed like security. He was wearing a tuxedo with a sash of medals across his chest. "What is he doing here?" Phineas whispered. "Who?" Tiffany asked. "That guy. My ex-wife's something. Brother, I think." Phineas watched as Hugo laughed at something the Prime Minister said. It wasn't a deferential laugh. It was the laugh of an equal. "Maybe he's working security?" Tiffany suggested. "With a sash of medals?" "No." Phineas's mind raced. Genevieve had always said her family was old-fashioned. He had interpreted that as poor and behind the times. Had he missed something? He decided to investigate. "Stay here," he ordered Tiffany. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't eat anything messy." Phineas buttoned his jacket and strode toward the front of the room. He needed to get to the bottom of this. If Genevieve's brother was here, maybe he could leverage the connection. Maybe the guy had lucked into a job with the royals. Phineas could use that. He approached the circle where Hugo stood. As he got closer, Hugo turned. His eyes landed on Phineas, and the smile vanished from his face instantly. It was replaced by a look of cold, hard granite. "Phineas," Hugo said. His voice was deep and commanded attention. The Prime Minister stopped talking and looked at Phineas. "Hugo," Phineas said, putting on his best salesman smile. "Long time no see. I didn't know you were in the diplomatic circles." "There is a lot you don't know, Phineas," Hugo said. He didn't offer his hand. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," Phineas said, puffing out his chest. "To the gala." "Ah," Hugo said. "The invite list. Yes. We thought it would be educational for you." "Educational?" Phineas frowned. "I'm here for business, Hugo. I hear the Grand Duchess is looking for investors. Since we're basically family, maybe you could make an introduction." The audacity of the request made the Prime Minister cough into his drink to hide a laugh. Hugo just stared at Phineas, his expression unreadable. "Family," Hugo repeated. "You ceased to be family the day you threw my sister out of your office like garbage because she wasn't shiny enough for your new image." Phineas waved his hand dismissively. "That was personal business. Water under the bridge. Genevieve was a good girl, but we grew apart. I needed to expand. She wanted to stay small. You know how it is." "Stay small," Hugo echoed. A dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. "Yes, she is very good at staying small, until she decides to be big." "Look, is she okay?" Phineas asked, feigning concern. "I assume you're helping her out? I hope she's not struggling." "She is doing quite well," Hugo said dryly. "She has found her footing." Good. Glad to hear it." "Anyway, about that introduction to the Duchess?" Hugo smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Oh, don't worry, Phineas. You will meet Her Royal Highness very soon. In fact, I believe the announcement is starting now." A trumpet fanfare cut through the air, silencing the room. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight hit the top of the grand staircase. The room went silent. Even the rattle of silverware stopped. All eyes turned to the top of the staircase. A master of ceremonies, dressed in full livery, struck a staff against the floor 3 times. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests," his voice boomed. "Pray silence for the hostess of the evening, Her Royal Highness, the Grand Duchess of Valoria, Genevieve Madeline St. Clair." Phineas froze. He felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold and dizzy. Genevieve? No, it couldn't be. There were a million Genevieves. It was a common name. It had to be a coincidence. But then she stepped into the light. It was her. But it wasn't the Genevieve he remembered. The woman he had divorced wore shapeless wool sweaters and kept her hair in a messy bun. She wore no makeup and walked with a shy shuffle. The woman at the top of the stairs was a goddess. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged a figure Phineas had never noticed she possessed. It was off the shoulder, revealing skin that glowed like alabaster. Around her neck sat a necklace that made Tiffany's jewelry look like plastic toys, a cascading river of sapphires and diamonds that had to be worth $50 million. On her head sat a delicate, intricate tiara of platinum and diamonds. She stood tall, her chin lifted, radiating an aura of absolute power. She looked out over the crowd of hundreds, over the billionaires, the politicians, the celebrities, with a gaze of calm command. Phineas's mouth fell open. He couldn't breathe. She began to descend the stairs. Every step was graceful, calculated. The crowd bowed their heads as she passed. "No way," a voice squeaked beside him. He hadn't realized Tiffany had followed him. Is that your ex?" Phineas couldn't speak. His brain was trying to reconcile the 2 images, the crying woman in the mediation room and this regal queen descending from the heavens. How? As she reached the bottom of the stairs, the crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She walked straight toward the center of the room, flanked by security and Hugo, who fell into step beside her. She began to greet guests. Her voice, amplified by the acoustics of the room, drifted over to Phineas. "Senator, so good to see you again. Thank you for your work on the climate initiative. Lady Covington, you look radiant. How is the charity in Brussels?" She was charming. She was articulate. She was magnetic. Phineas watched, paralyzed. He remembered telling her she was socially awkward and an embarrassment at corporate dinners. He realized now, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that she hadn't been awkward. She had been bored. She had been playing down her intelligence to make him feel big, and he had thrown her away. She's a duchess," Phineas stammered, his voice cracking. A man standing next to him, an elderly banker named Cornelius, turned and looked at Phineas over his spectacles. "You didn't know? The St. Clair family rules Valoria. She abdicated her duties for 5 years to marry some American commoner for true love. Gave up her title, her allowance, everything. Lived like a pauper." Cornelius chuckled. Rumor has it the husband was a complete fool. Didn't know what he had. Cheated on her, belittled her, and then divorced her because he wanted someone higher status. Can you imagine the stupidity? Phineas felt like he was going to vomit. The room was spinning. "He didn't know," Phineas whispered. "No," Cornelius said. "She wanted to be loved for herself, not her crown. A romantic notion. Clearly it failed. So she returned home, reclaimed her title, and now she runs the Sovereign Wealth Fund. She is the most powerful woman in Europe right now." Cornelius paused, squinting at Phineas. "Say, you look a bit pale, son. You all right?" Phineas didn't answer. He was watching Genevieve. She was moving through the crowd, and she was getting closer. She wasn't avoiding him. She was heading in his general direction. "She's coming here," Tiffany hissed, frantically smoothing her hair. "Phineas, introduce me. If we get a photo with her, my Instagram will explode." "Shut up, Tiffany," Phineas snapped, panic rising in his throat. He had to leave. He had to get out of here. But his legs wouldn't move, and part of him, the arrogant, delusional part that had gotten him this far, started to whisper a new narrative. "She invited you," the voice said. "She sent the invite. She still loves you. She wants you back. Look at you. You're successful. You're handsome. She did this to impress you. She wants to show you she's worthy of you now." Yes, that had to be it. This was a display for him. She wanted him to see what he was missing so he would take her back. Phineas straightened his tie. He slicked back his hair. He pushed down the nausea and replaced it with his trademark smarm. "Watch this," he told Tiffany. "I'm going to go talk to her." "Phineas, are you sure?" Tiffany asked, looking doubtful. "She looks scary." "She's my ex-wife, Tiff. I know every inch of her. She's just putting on a show." Phineas stepped out of the crowd, directly into Genevieve's path. The room went quiet. Everyone knew who Phineas was. The gossip had circulated the moment he arrived. The foolish husband was here. The court jester had entered the Queen's court. Genevieve stopped. She was 10 feet away. She looked at him. Her face didn't crumble. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked at him with the polite, distant curiosity one might give to a bug on a windshield. "Genevieve," Phineas said, his voice booming slightly too loud in the quiet room. He opened his arms as if to hug her. "Or should I say, Your Highness? You certainly know how to keep a secret, don't you, darling?" The security guard stepped forward, but Genevieve raised a hand to stop them. She stood perfectly still. "Mr. Cooper," she said. Her voice was cool, crisp water. "I see you received the invitation." "I did," Phineas grinned, taking a step closer. "And I have to say, this is quite the upgrade from the apartment in Brooklyn. You look good, Jen. Really good." He looked her up and down in a way that was visibly offensive to everyone in the room. "I assume you invited me here because you wanted to talk," Phineas continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone. "Maybe discuss the future? I know things ended roughly, but seeing you like this, well, a man can admit when he might have been a bit hasty." The silence in the room was deafening. Guests were exchanging horrified glances. Was he actually hitting on the Grand Duchess after dumping her? Genevieve tilted her head slightly. A small, dry smile touched her lips. It wasn't a warm smile. "I invited you, Phineas, because I am a philanthropist," she said. "Philanthropist?" Phineas blinked. "Yes," she continued, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "Tonight is a charity gala. We are raising money for the education of the underprivileged. I thought it would be charitable to give you a lesson." "A lesson?" Phineas's smile faltered. "A lesson in value," Genevieve said. She took a step forward, and for the first time, Phineas saw the steel in her eyes. "You spent 5 years telling me I was worthless. You told me I was an anchor, dragging you down. You told me I lacked vision." She gestured to the room, to the gold, the crystals, the kings and queens waiting on her word. It seems, Phineas, that your appraisal skills are severely lacking. If you couldn't spot a duchess in a cardigan, how can I trust you to spot value in a stock portfolio? Scattered laughter broke out in the room. Phineas's face turned bright red. Now, Jen, let's not do this in public, he muttered, his confidence crumbling. In public? Genevieve raised an eyebrow. You divorced me in a public cafe because you didn't want to make a scene at home. You flaunted your mistresses in public. You humiliated me in public for years. I think it is only fitting that we conclude our business in public. She turned to the crowd, addressing the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cooper here is a prime example of why we must educate ourselves. He chased the glitter of fool's gold. She glanced briefly at Tiffany, who shrank back, and threw away the diamond because it wasn't polished enough for his taste. She looked back at Phineas. Enjoy the evening, Mr. Cooper. The hors d'oeuvres are excellent. And do try the wine. It's from my family's vineyards. You always said you hated cheap wine. This bottle costs more than your car. With that, she turned her back on him. Hugo, she said. Shall we proceed to the auction? Yes, Your Highness, Hugo said, shooting Phineas a look of pure triumph. They walked away, leaving Phineas standing alone in the center of the ballroom, his face burning, as the laughter of the global elite washed over him like a tidal wave. The humiliation in the ballroom hung over Phineas like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. He retreated to his table, table 14, which now felt less like a slight and more like a quarantine zone. People at nearby tables, the minor aristocrats and second-tier tech moguls, were pointedly turning their chairs away from him. Phineas, Tiffany whined, poking at a piece of endive salad with aggressive boredom. Can we go? Everyone is staring, and not in the good way. That guy with the monocle is literally laughing at us. We are not leaving, Phineas hissed, gripping his champagne flute so hard the stem threatened to snap. If we leave now, we look like defeated dogs. We stay. We show them that I don't care about the ramblings of a bitter ex-wife. She didn't sound bitter, Tiffany muttered, taking a sip of wine. She sounded rich. Phineas shot her a look that would have withered a cactus. She's playing a game. She thinks she can embarrass me? I built a hedge fund from nothing. I destroyed companies bigger than her little country. I'm going to turn this around. How? Tiffany asked, genuinely skeptical. Money, Phineas said, his eyes fixing on the stage where the auctioneer was setting up. These people pretend to care about lineage and manners, but at the end of the day, they're all whores for capital. If I win the biggest item of the night, if I drop a check that makes their eyes water, they'll have to respect me. They'll have to welcome me back. The lights dimmed again. The charity auction was beginning. The auctioneer was a man named Lord Holloway, a rotund British man with a voice like a foghorn. He rattled off items that went for astronomical sums: a week on a private island in the Maldives, $200,000, a vintage Ferrari, $3.5 million, a private dinner with the Rolling Stones, $500,000. Phineas sat and waited. He needed the big one, the showstopper. Finally, Lord Holloway cleared his throat. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the pièce de résistance. Lot number 1. 2 assistants wheeled out a covered easel and a velvet box. This lot is unique, Holloway boomed. It consists of 2 parts. First, the sovereign key, a symbolic key to the city of Valoria, granting the bearer honorary citizenship and tax-exempt status for business dealings within the Grand Duchy for a period of 5 years. A ripple of excitement went through the room. Tax-exempt status in Valoria? That was worth tens of millions to the right investor. Phineas sat up straight. This was it. This was the golden ticket. And secondly, Halloway continued. A private, 1-hour strategic partnership meeting with Her Royal Highness, Grand Duchess Genevieve, to discuss the allocation of the Royal Trust's renewable energy portfolio. Phineas's heart hammered against his ribs. It was perfect. It was everything he needed. Not only would it solve his tax problems, but it would force Genevieve to sit in a room with him, professionally, where he could charm or bully her into a deal. He could reclaim the power dynamic. Bidding starts at $1 million, Halloway announced. 1 million! A paddle went up near the front. 2 million, shouted a Russian oligarch. 3 million! The price climbed rapidly. Phineas waited. He watched the room. The air was electric. At 5 million, the bidding slowed. At 6 million, it was down to 2 people. The oil CEO Phineas had seen earlier, and a quiet tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. 6.5 million, the tech billionaire said. 7 million, the oil CEO counted. Going once, going twice. Phineas stood up. He adjusted his jacket. He raised his paddle high. $10 million, he shouted. The room gasped. Heads snapped toward table 14. 10 million was an aggressive jump. It was a statement. Lord Halloway adjusted his glasses. The gentleman at the back bids $10 million. Do I hear 11? The oil CEO shook his head. The tech billionaire looked at his phone and shrugged. Going once, Halloway chanted. Phineas smirked. He looked toward the royal dais. Genevieve was sitting there, her face impassive. But Hugo was leaning over, whispering something in her ear. Suddenly, a paddle went up from the very front table. 12 million, said a voice. Phineas looked. It was Benedict Montgomery. Phineas's blood ran cold. Benedict? Benedict didn't have the liquidity for this. Or did he? He was doing this to spite Phineas. He was doing this to humiliate him further. 15 million, Phineas barked, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Tiffany tugged on his sleeve. Phineas, 15 million? That's the house money. That's the liquidity for the merger. Shut up, Phineas snarled. I know what I'm doing. 16 million, Benedict drawled, not even looking back. He took a sip of his scotch. Phineas felt the sweat trickling down his back. 16 million. That was pushing the limit of his personal cash reserves. He would have to dip into the firm's operating capital. It was risky, borderline illegal, if not structured right. But he couldn't lose to Benedict, and he couldn't lose in front of Genevieve. 18 million! Phineas shouted. The room was silent now. This was no longer charity. This was a duel. Benedict paused. He looked at Genevieve. She gave a barely perceptible nod. 20 million, Benedict said calmly. Phineas saw red. The nod. They were conspiring. She wanted Benedict to win. She wanted to deny Phineas the prize. He wouldn't let her. He would buy her attention if he had to. $25 million, Phineas screamed, his voice cracking slightly. A collective murmur of shock swept through the crowd. 25 million was absurd. It was double the valuation of the tax breaks. Benedict turned around in his chair. He looked at Phineas, smiled a slow, shark-like smile, and lowered his paddle. Too rich for my blood, Benedict announced. Let the man have it. Sold. Lord Halloway slammed the gavel down with the force of a judge sentencing a criminal. To Mr. Phineas Cooper for $25 million. A polite applause broke out, but it felt hollow. Phineas sank back into his chair, breathing heavy. He had won. He had the meeting. He had the tax status. You just spent $25 million, Tiffany whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Phineas, do we have $25 million? It's an investment, Tiffany, Phineas snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead with a napkin. I'll make it back in 6 months with the Valorian contracts. You have to spend money to make money. But as he looked up at the dais, he saw Genevieve. She wasn't looking at him with respect. She wasn't looking at him with fear. She was raising a glass of champagne to Benedict Montgomery, and Benedict was raising his glass back. A sinking feeling formed in Phineas's stomach. Had he just won? Or had he just stepped into a bear trap? An aide appeared at their table almost instantly. He was a tall man with a severe haircut, holding a silver tray with a credit terminal and a contract. "Mr. Cooper," the aide said. "Congratulations. Her Royal Highness requests that payment be settled immediately to facilitate the transfer of the citizenship documents, and she has cleared her schedule for 9 a.m. tomorrow for your meeting." "Immediately?" Phineas scoffed. "Usually I have my accountant wire the funds within 30 days. "Gala rules, sir," the aide said. His voice clipped. "For bids over 10 million, immediate verification of funds is required. To prevent hollow gestures." Phineas gritted his teeth. He pulled out his black titanium centurion card. He prayed the credit line held. He prayed the offshore transfer he had initiated that morning had cleared. He tapped the card. The machine whirred. Approved. Phineas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He signed the receipt with a flourish. "Tell Her Highness I look forward to our chat," Phineas said arrogantly. The aide took the receipt, looked at it, and gave Phineas a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I am sure she is looking forward to it as well. Enjoy the rest of your evening." Phineas downed his drink. "Come on, Tiffany. We're going to the bar. I need something stronger than champagne." As they walked away, Phineas missed the moment where the aide walked up to the dais, handed the receipt to Hugo, and Hugo whispered to Genevieve, "The rat has taken the cheese." The headache. Phineas woke up with the next morning was of biblical proportions. It felt as though a construction crew was jackhammering directly behind his eyes. He groaned, rolling over in the king-sized bed of his suite at the St. Regis. The other side of the bed was empty. Tiffany had left a note on the pillow. "Phineas, went shopping. Left your card on the dresser. Don't be mad, Lowell." Tiak. He cursed. He checked his phone. 8:15 a.m. Damn it! He scrambled out of bed. The meeting with Genevieve was at 9 a.m. at the Valorian Consulate on the Upper East Side. He had 45 minutes to shower, dress, and get across town in rush-hour traffic. He moved with frantic energy, cutting himself while shaving, burning his tongue on coffee that was too hot. He threw on his grey power suit, the one he wore for hostile takeovers. He needed to look like a wolf, not a supplicant. He arrived at the consulate at 8:58 a.m., sweating slightly despite the chill in the air. The building was an imposing limestone mansion with the Valorian flag, a gold falcon on a field of azure waving above the door. He marched up the steps. "Phineas Cooper to see the Grand Duchess." The guard checked a clipboard. "Yes, Mr. Cooper. You are expected. 4th floor. Conference room B." Phineas frowned. Conference room B? He expected the Oval Office equivalent. Room B sounded secondary. He took the elevator up. The doors opened to a sleek, modern hallway. He found the room and pushed open the heavy oak doors. It wasn't a cozy office. It was a boardroom. And it wasn't empty. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Genevieve. She was wearing a cream-coloured business suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She looked every inch the CEO of a nation. To her right sat Hugo. To her left sat a team of 4 lawyers with binders as thick as phone books. And sitting at the far end of the table, Benedict Montgomery. Phineas stopped in the doorway. "What is this? I paid for a private meeting." "And you have it," Genevieve said, her voice calm. "Please take a seat, Phineas. We have a lot to get through." "Why is he here?" Phineas pointed at Benedict. Mr. Montgomery is the newly appointed Chief Financial Advisor to the Royal Trust, Genevieve said. He advises me on all high-risk acquisitions. Acquisitions? Phineas sat down warily. I'm not here to be acquired, Jen. I'm here to partner. I won the tax-exempt status. I want to move my European operations to Valoria. I want access to the Trust's capital for my new leverage fund. Genevieve folded her hands on the table. Yes, the tax-exempt status. About that. She nodded to Hugo. Hugo slid a document down the table. The sovereign key you purchased, Hugo explained, grants tax-exempt status for business dealings within the Grand Duchy. However, to qualify for that status, your business must pass the royal audit for ethical compliance. Ethical compliance? Phineas laughed. I run a hedge fund, not a soup kitchen. My compliance is fine. We checked, Benedict said, opening a folder. It's not. Benedict began to read. Phineas Cooper Asset Management, heavily leveraged in predatory short-selling of medical research firms, outstanding lawsuits in 3 states for labor violations, and most interestingly, a series of off-book loans from shell companies in the Caymans that look suspiciously like money laundering. Phineas slammed his hand on the table. That is slander. Those are standard financial structures. Not in Valoria, Genevieve said softly. In Valoria, those are crimes. So what? Phineas sneered. So you deny my tax status. Fine. I still have the meeting. I want the investment. I have the best returns in the market, Genevieve. You can't deny the math. If you want to grow your country's wealth, you need me. Genevieve looked at him with a strange expression. Pity? No, it was deeper than that. It was finality. Phineas, she said, do you remember the divorce settlement? What? The non-sequitur threw him off. Yeah. I gave you the house in Jersey and a payout. You signed the NDA. I signed the NDA regarding our marriage, she corrected. But I didn't sign away my memory. You see, when we were married, you often brought your work home. You left files on the kitchen counter. You talked on the phone while I was cooking dinner. You thought I wasn't listening. You thought I was too simple to understand what a naked short was, or what it meant to cook the books. Phineas's face paled. You can't prove any of that. That's hearsay. It was, Genevieve said, until you gave us access. I never gave you access. You did last night, Hugo said, a smirk playing on his lips, when you paid $25 million with your corporate Centurion card. That transaction triggered a due diligence check by our processing bank. The processing bank for the Royal Trust is Ironclad Global. Phineas stopped breathing. Ironclad Global was the bank that held his firm's primary line of credit. It was the bank that kept him afloat. You own Ironclad, Phineas whispered. We are the majority shareholder, Genevieve confirmed. And when we saw a $25 million withdrawal from an account that was already leveraged to the hilt, it triggered an automatic audit clause in your loan agreement. Clause 14b. In the event of reckless spending endangering the collateral, the lender reserves the right to call the loan immediately. The silence in the room was absolute. You're calling the loan? Phineas choked out. The whole thing? $300 million, Benedict said cheerfully. Due by close of business today. I don't have 300 million liquid, Phineas screamed, standing up. My assets are tied up in the market. If I sell now, I'll crash the stock prices. I'll lose everything. Then I suggest you start selling, Genevieve said, her voice turning hard. Because if the funds aren't in our account by 5 p.m., Ironclad will seize your assets, your portfolio, your penthouse, your Bentley, even that tuxedo you're wearing. Phineas stared at her. He looked for the woman who used to bake cookies and cry when he yelled. She wasn't there. This was a monarch declaring war. "Why?" Phineas whispered. "Is this revenge? Because I left you?" Genevieve stood up slowly. She leaned over the table. "You didn't just leave me, Phineas. You tried to break me. You isolated me from my family. You made me feel small so you could feel big. You took a woman who was born to lead nations and tried to turn her into a maid. I don't care that you didn't love me. I care that you tried to erase me." She straightened up. "And besides," she added, "it's not just personal, it's business. Your firm is a cancer on the market. You destroy value to make a profit. My fund builds value. We are simply correcting the market." She gestured to the door. "You have 7 hours, Phineas. I suggest you get to work." Phineas stumbled back. He looked at Benedict, who offered a mock salute. He looked at Hugo, who was stone-faced. He looked at Genevieve, who had already turned her attention back to her paperwork. He turned and ran out of the room. He needed to make calls. He needed to scream. He needed a miracle. As he sprinted through the lobby, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from a financial news app. Breaking. Phineas Cooper Asset Management under audit by Ironclad Global. Stock prices for Cooper major holdings plummeting. It had already leaked. They had leaked it. He burst out onto the street, fumbling for his phone to call his trader. "Sell!" he screamed into the phone as pedestrians stared. "Sell everything! I don't care about the price! Get me cash!" But as he stood there on the sidewalk, watching the numbers on his phone screen turn red, he realized something terrifying. The $25 million he had spent last night? That was the money he needed to survive the margin call he was facing now. He had paid for his own execution, and Genevieve had handed him the receipt. The run from the Valorian consulate to the offices of Phineas Cooper Asset Management on Wall Street was a nightmare of physical and psychological endurance. Phineas's Uber account had been suspended mid-request, a payment method error that flashed on his screen like a digital indictment. He tried to hail a cab, but in his panic he looked like a madman, sweating profusely in a suit that cost more than the taxi itself. Drivers sped past him. He ran. He ran until his lungs burned, and his Tom Ford loafers blistered his heels. When he finally burst through the glass doors of his firm's lobby, he was gasping for air, his hair wild, his eyes manic. He slapped his security badge against the turnstile scanner. Beep. Access denied. "What?" Phineas slammed the card down again. "Let me in. It's my building." The security guard, a man named Earl whom Phineas had ignored for 5 years, looked up slowly from his monitor. "System says your clearance is revoked, Mr. Cooper. Lockdown protocol initiating." "Revoked? I own the company," Phineas screamed, vaulting over the turnstile before Earl could stop him. He sprinted for the elevators, jamming the button. When he reached the 40th floor, the scene that greeted him was one of absolute bedlam. It looked less like a financial firm and more like the deck of the Titanic post-iceberg. Phones were ringing off the hook, a cacophony of shrill demands. Analysts were shredding documents. Traders were shouting orders that no one was listening to. "Gareth," Phineas bellowed, spotting his head trader near the window. "Gareth, talk to me. Why are the screens red?" Gareth turned. His face was grey. He held a phone in one hand and a bottle of Pepto-Bismol in the other. "It's over, Phineas," Gareth said, his voice trembling. "Ironclad executed the margin call at 9:15 a.m. They dumped our entire position in biotech futures. The market panic triggered a sell-off in our other holdings. We're down 80%. 80% in an hour." "Buy it back!" Phineas grabbed Gareth's lapels. "Use the Cayman reserves. Leverage the penthouse." "We can't!" Gareth shoved Phineas away, something he would never have dared to do yesterday. "The accounts are frozen. The Cayman authorities flagged us for money laundering 5 minutes ago. Interpol is involved, Phineas. Interpol." Phineas staggered back, hitting a desk. "Genevieve," he whispered. "She didn't just call the loan. She tipped off the regulators." "And that's not the worst part," Gareth said, throwing a tablet onto the desk. "Look at the news." Phineas looked. The headline on the Financial Times website screamed, "Grand Duchess exposes Wall Street fraud. Royal charity gala funded by seizure of unethical assets." The article detailed how Phineas Cooper, in a desperate bid for status, had unknowingly signed a contract during the auction that allocated his $25 million bid directly into a victims' compensation fund for the very companies he had destroyed. "You gave away the liquidity," Gareth spat. "You paid $25 million to buy a meeting where she fired you." Phineas felt the room spin. He needed to get out. He needed assets that weren't digital. He needed his watches, his gold. He turned and ran back to the elevators, ignoring the shouting of his employees who were demanding their severance pay. He hit the street and sprinted toward his penthouse on 57th Street. He had a safe there. There was cash, diamonds he had bought for Tiffany. He could grab them, get to Teterboro Airport, and charter a plane to a non-extradition country before the feds closed the net. He burst into his apartment building. The doorman, Clive, stepped in his path. "Mr. Cooper, I'm afraid I can't let you up," Clive said, his face stern. "Get out of my way, Clive, or I'll have you fired." Phineas shoved past him. "The police are already upstairs, sir," Clive shouted after him. Phineas froze in the elevator. "Police?" "No. Not yet." It was too fast. The doors opened to his penthouse. The door was ajar. He heard voices. He walked in. The apartment was being stripped. 2 uniformed officers stood by the door, watching as movers packed paintings into crates. And there, in the middle of the living room, was Tiffany. She wasn't crying. She was directing the movers. "Be careful with that Louis Vuitton trunk," she shouted at a burly man. "That leather scratches easily." "Tiffany?" Phineas rasped. She turned. She was dressed in her traveling clothes, cashmere sweatpants, and a designer hoodie. She looked fresh, calm, and utterly detached. "Oh," she said, checking her nails. "You're here. I thought they arrested you already." "What are you doing?" Phineas asked, his voice shaking. "Why are you packing my bags?" "Your bags?" Tiffany laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Phineas, honey, these aren't your bags. These are my bags. I bought them. Technically you bought them. But possession is 9/10 of the law, right?" "We need to go," Phineas said, stepping toward her. "The bank is seizing everything. We have to leave the country. I have a contact in Brazil." Tiffany held up a hand. "Whoa, stop right there." "We?" "There is no we, Phineas. I Googled the Valorian laws. If I stay with you, I'm an accomplice. If I cooperate with the assets recovery team, I get to keep 10% of the jewelry as a whistleblower fee." Phineas stared at her. You snitched on me?" "I'm a survivor, baby," Tiffany said with a shrug. "You taught me that. Kill or be killed, right? That's what you told me when you fired your secretary last Christmas." She picked up her handbag, a Birkin that cost more than Phineas's first car. "Besides," she added, looking him up and down with genuine disgust, "you're poor now, and let's be honest, Phineas, you were barely tolerable when you were rich. Without the money, you're just a short, angry man with a receding hairline." She snapped her fingers at the movers. "Let's go, boys." She walked past him, her perfume, a scent he had paid for, wafting in the air. She didn't look back. Phineas stood alone in the center of the living room. The officers stepped forward. "Mr. Cooper," one of them said, "we have a warrant for the seizure of all physical assets. We need you to open the safe." Phineas looked at the safe, hidden behind the painting, which was already gone. Phineas started, but his voice failed him. His phone buzzed. It was a text message, a generic automated alert from his service provider. Your service plan has been cancelled due to non-payment. Goodbye. The phone went dead. Phineas sank to his knees on the imported Italian marble floor. The silence of the penthouse was deafening. The castle hadn't just crumbled, it had vanished, leaving him exposed to the cold, hard wind of reality. 6 months later, the winter in New York was particularly brutal that year. The wind whipped off the Hudson River, cutting through layers of clothing like a knife. Outside the Metropolitan Opera House, the gala season was in full swing. Limousines idled in a long, exhaust-choked line, waiting to deposit the city's elite onto the red carpet. A man in a slightly ill-fitting red valet jacket shivered as he jogged to the door of a sleek, black Maybach. His name tag, crooked and plastic, read, Phineas, Valet Service. Phineas Cooper had aged 10 years in 6 months. His hair was grey and thinning, no longer dyed and styled by a Park Avenue salon. His face was gaunt, the result of a diet of ramen and stress. He lived in a basement efficiency in Queens, a far cry from the 57th Street penthouse. The legal battles had stripped him of everything. The divorce settlement with Genevieve was ironclad. She owed him nothing. The government had seized his remaining assets to pay the fines. He avoided prison only by turning state's evidence against his own partners, a move that ensured he would never work in finance again. He was a pariah, a radioactive man. He opened the back door of the Maybach, keeping his head down. Eye contact was discouraged for the help. "Good evening, sir." "Ma'am," he mumbled, extending a hand to help the passengers out. A polished black shoe stepped onto the curb. Then another. "Thank you, my good man," a familiar voice boomed. Phineas froze. He knew that voice. He looked up, against his better judgment. It was Benedict Montgomery. Benedict looked better than ever. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. On his arm was a beautiful woman. Not a model, but a senator Phineas recognized from the news. Benedict paused. He looked at the valet. He squinted, as if trying to place a face he had seen in a dream. "Phineas?" Benedict asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Is that you?" Phineas wanted to run. He wanted to dissolve into the pavement. But he couldn't. He needed this job. He needed the tips. "Good evening, Mr. Montgomery," Phineas said, his voice a rasp. Benedict laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, which made it worse. It was a laugh of genuine amusement. "Well, well," Benedict said, reaching into his pocket. "The market really does correct itself, doesn't it? I hear you're the best parker in the city, Phineas. Very efficient." Benedict pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He held it out. "Keep it close to the curb, Phineas. I don't want scratches." Phineas stared at the bill. It was humiliating. It was charity. He took it. "Yes, sir," Phineas said. Benedict patted him on the shoulder, a gesture one gives to a dog, and walked toward the entrance. But the procession wasn't over. Behind the Maybach was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, with the royal crest of Valoria on the flag. The crowd of paparazzi erupted. "The Duchess! The Duchess is here!" Phineas stiffened. He stepped back into the shadows, trying to hide behind the open door of the car. The driver, a massive man in a security suit, opened the rear door. Genevieve stepped out. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of silver silk that shimmered like moonlight. She looked happy. Not the manic, drug-fueled happiness of the socialites Phineas used to know, but a deep, serene contentment. She was laughing at something the man beside her said. The man was Hugo. He looked regal in a tuxedo, protective and proud. Phineas watched them from 5 feet away. He was invisible. He was part of the machinery of the city, no more important than the fire hydrant or the sidewalk. Genevieve stopped to wave at the cameras. Her eyes scanned the crowd. For a brief, heart-stopping second, her gaze landed on the valet in the red jacket, shivering in the cold. Phineas held his breath. He waited for the anger. He waited for the gloating. He waited for her to point and laugh, to show Hugo, to complete her revenge. But she didn't. Her eyes swept over him without a flicker of recognition. To her, he wasn't Phineas Cooper, the man who had broken her heart. He wasn't the monster of her past. He was just a valet, a stranger. She turned back to Hugo, said something that made him smile, and walked up the stairs, ascending into the light and warmth of the opera house. The doors closed behind her. Phineas stood alone on the sidewalk. The wind bit through his thin jacket. He looked at the $100 bill in his hand. He realized then the true depth of his punishment. It wasn't the poverty. It wasn't the loss of status. It was the irrelevance. He had spent his life terrified that Genevieve would embarrass him. But in the end, she hadn't needed to embarrass him. She had simply outgrown him. She had become a queen, and he had remained a small, petty man who mistook cruelty for strength. "Hey, buddy!" The driver of the next car, a Honda Civic, honked his horn. "Are you going to park the car or just stand there?" Phineas blinked, snapping back to the present. He shoved the money into his pocket. He bowed his head, the posture of a servant. "Right away, sir," Phineas said. He got into the Honda, smelling of stale fast food and pine air freshener, and drove it into the darkness of the garage. The King of Wall Street was dead. Long live the Queen. Phineas Cooper learned the hard way that true worth isn't measured by the balance in your bank account, but by the character of your soul. He spent a lifetime building a castle on a foundation of arrogance, only to watch it wash away when faced with the quiet, undeniable power of dignity. He thought he was playing a game of chess against a pawn, never realizing he was sitting across from the Queen. In the end, Genevieve didn't need to destroy him. She simply let him destroy himself, proving that the heaviest baggage we carry is often our own ego. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of royal justice and sweet karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this with a friend who loves a good drama, and subscribe for more stories where the underdog takes the crown. See you in the next video.